The snow had started falling just as I turned off the main road and onto the long gravel drive of the Cross family estate. A colonial mansion nestled behind rows of pine and formality. Its windows glowed warm and golden, betraying the coldness inside. Every year, without fail, Christmas Eve dinner at my parents' house brought together a cast of characters bound by blood but separated by bitterness. I parked behind a line of imported SUVs and took a deep breath before stepping out, my dress shoes crunching over frozen gravel. It had been a year since I'd last seen most of them. That was intentional. Inside, the house was decked out in tasteful excess garland, draped over the staircase. A 12-foot tree crowded with ornaments older than me, and the faint smell of rosemary and prime rib hanging in the air. My mother, always poised like a magazine hostess, greeted me with a kiss on the cheek and a barely concealed once-over. "You look tired," she said. "Long week?" "Long year," I replied, handing her the wine I'd brought. She smiled, tight-lipped, and disappeared into the kitchen. My father gave me a firm handshake, a nod that passed for affection. "Glad you made it, son." I nodded back. No one asked if I was staying the night. They already knew I wouldn't. My cousin Logan was already there, sprawled on the leather sofa like he owned the place. Legs crossed, glass of scotch in hand. "Well, well," he said, raising his glass. "Look who decided to join the living." I ignored the jab, hanging my coat with forced patience. He'd always had a way of getting under my skin, too charming for his own good, too reckless to ever face consequences. "Logan," I said evenly. "Still drinking before 5? "It's the holidays," he replied with a smirk. "Time's flexible." I moved into the dining room, where the long oak table was set for 16, place cards perfectly arranged. I found mine at the far end, between Lily and Aunt Grace neutral territory. Small talk buzzed around the room like static, but underneath it was the hum of tension. Old wounds dressed in holiday cheer. Logan watched me from across the room, eyes sharp. He knew something. I could feel it. And whatever it was, he was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. It started with a fight. Stupid, impulsive, fueled by beer and ego. 5 years ago, my sophomore year at Crestwood University, my roommate, Derek Hale, had been pushing my buttons for weeks, borrowing my things without asking, blasting music at 3 a.m., leaving cigarette butts on my desk. But that night, he crossed a line. I came back from a late shift at the IT desk to find him in my side of the room, reading a journal I kept buried in my drawer. Notes, ideas, pieces of code, things I hadn't shown anyone. "Didn't know you were such a poet," he'd said, mocking. I lost it. I shoved him hard, and he shoved back. Words escalated into shouts, shouts into fists. Someone knocked over the lamp. The bulb exploded. In the scramble, I grabbed the edge of my desk to steady myself, but my elbow knocked over a half-full bottle of vodka onto a power strip. The sparks were immediate. The curtain caught first. Then the bedding. Then the whole damn room. By the time campus security broke down the door, the smoke had filled the hall. I dragged Derek into the hallway, coughing and gasping. He was barely conscious, face red with heat, lashes singed. The paramedics said I'd saved his life. The fire report called it an accident. Electrical malfunction. Dorm wiring was ancient. A lawsuit waiting to happen. They needed a clean explanation. The school got their headline. "Brave student saves roommate from blaze." No one asked too many questions, and I never corrected the record. But Logan knew. He'd been visiting that weekend, crashing in the common room. He saw the aftermath. He saw the bruises. He found me outside the next morning, sitting on the curb in a t-shirt and smoke-drenched jeans, head in my hands. "Want to tell me what really happened?" he'd asked. And I did. I was 19 and scared and stupid, and didn't know what else to do. He promised he'd keep it quiet. "Cousins stick together," he'd said, but there was a glint in his eye even then. Like he knew this secret would be useful someday. Like he was already doing the math. I'd spent the last 5 years waiting for that someday. And tonight, Something told me it had arrived. Dinner was served promptly at 7. My mother's way of asserting control, even if everything else was spiraling beneath the surface. The dining room glowed under the antique chandelier, its light bouncing off crystal glasses and polished silverware, illuminating every polite smile and veiled insult. The long table was full, me parents at the head, flanked by my Uncle Mitch and Aunt Grace, then their daughters who barely spoke to anyone but each other. Across from them were the newer faces, me cousin Jordan's latest boyfriend, a tech startup guy with too much cologne, and Vanessa, Logan's ex, who still showed up to these things as if they hadn't broken up 3 Thanksgivings ago. And then there was my grandfather, Arthur Cross, 85, stone-faced, half-deaf, and completely lucid when it suited him. He sat at the other end of the table in a tailored navy suit, sipping bourbon slowly, silently observing the room like a man choosing his successor. Rumor had it he'd started rewriting his will after a health scare in September. No one admitted to knowing the details, but everyone was on their best behavior, or at least pretending to be. Logan sat 2 seats down from me, lounging back in his chair like this was a poker night, not a formal dinner. He kept giving me looks, sharp, playful, edged with something I didn't like. He was enjoying himself too much. Every time someone asked me about work, he chuckled under his breath. When Lily mentioned that I'd helped her with a computer issue, he muttered, "Bet he's good at covering his tracks." I ignored him, but the heat under my collar started to rise. "Everything okay?" my mother asked, catching my eye. I smiled too quickly. "Fine. Just tired." She nodded and went back to cutting her duck confit. Logan leaned in slightly, voice just loud enough for me to hear. "You really think no one's figured it out yet?" I stared at my plate, gripping the stem of my wine glass. My voice was low, calm. "Not the time." He just smiled. "Maybe not, but the time's coming." The conversation buzzed around us: politics, real estate, some story about a neighbor's divorce, but I barely registered it. I could feel Logan's eyes on me like a spotlight. And something told me I was about to be shoved center stage. It was after the second course, when the plates were cleared and the conversation shifted to safe holiday topics, that Lily leaned over and whispered, "Come, help me grab more bread from the kitchen." I followed her without question, glad for the escape. In the quiet hallway, she stopped just past the archway and turned to me, her expression guarded. "Logan's been talking," she said, "to Jordan, to Vanessa, to Aunt Grace, dropping hints, saying you're not as clean as you look." My jaw tightened. Did he say what he meant? She shook her head. "No, just little things, questions, comments. He's trying to stir something up. You know how he gets when he's bored." I forced a half smile. "He's always bored. This feels different," she said quietly. "Like he's holding something." "He is." I didn't say it aloud. Instead, I took a breath, pulled a baguette from the basket, and broke it in half, just to give my hands something to do. "He's bluffing," I lied. "Trying to rattle me." "And is it working?" she asked. I didn't answer. Back at the table, Logan was mid-story about some disastrous ski trip, drawing laughter from half the table like nothing had happened. I dropped into my seat and tore a piece of bread slowly, chewing while the edges of the room blurred. Logan didn't need to say anything else. He'd already planted the seed. The way people glanced at me now, curious, subtle, different. Lily had noticed it first. Soon others would too. Logan caught my eye and raised his glass slightly. The toast only meant for me. I didn't return it. I didn't blink. But inside, my mind was racing. If he opened his mouth and said what he knew or even hinted at it, I'd be buried in questions I wasn't ready to answer. 5 years of silence, teetering on the edge of collapse. My father hadn't said much all evening, but he was watching now. I could feel it. Not Logan. Me. His expression unreadable. The same look he'd given me the night everything started to unravel. Back then, I told myself the secret would fade. That time would bury it. But time doesn't bury things. It preserves them until someone decides to dig. The table was quieting, the way it always did when dessert arrived. My mother placed the last ramekin of crème brûlée in front of my grandfather, with the precision of someone who equated perfection with control. Candles flickered, forks scraped china, and the air buzzed with wine and the forced civility that held this family together. I was just about to crack through the caramel shell on mine when Logan spoke. "They still don't know, do they?" His voice cut through the room like a snapped violin string light. Amused, just loud enough to demand attention without seeming deliberate. I froze. My fork hovered mid-air, breath stalled. Around me, heads turned. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. My Aunt Grace blinked. "Know what?" she asked, laughing nervously. "Logan, what are you talking about?" He leaned back, eyes locked on me. The fire from the nearby hearth dancing across his smug expression. "Oh, come on. Don't make me be the bad guy. If he's not going to tell you, maybe it's not my place." He looked down at his untouched dessert, then back at me. "But it's been 5 years. That's a long time to pretend something didn't happen." The silence became a presence. Tense. Heavy. My uncle shifted in his seat. Jordan whispered something to Vanessa, who stared at me like she was trying to see through skin. I cleared my throat, hoping my voice wouldn't crack. "Ignore him. He's drunk." Logan chuckled. "2 glasses of wine. That's all. But sure. Let's go with that." "What are you talking about?" Aunt Grace repeated, voice sharper now. Logan turned to her, tone almost pitying. "Ask Ethan." The room pivoted to me in a single collective motion, like a courtroom awaiting a verdict. I stared at Logan, then at the table. My heart thudded against my ribs. All I could hear was the soft clink of someone setting down their spoon. Then my dad David spoke for the first time since the main course. Enough. Just that. No raised voice. No explanation. But the weight in his tone silenced even Logan. Everyone turned toward him, but he didn't meet anyone's eyes. Not mine. Not Logan's. Just stared into the fire like he already knew how this night would end. Time stretched in that awful, brittle silence. I felt every eye on me. My hands stayed still in my lap, knuckles white. "He's just being dramatic," I said, voice low, calm on the surface but unraveling underneath. "It's Logan. You know how he is." But they didn't blink. No one laughed it off. Not this time. Aunt Grace leaned forward. "Ethan, is there something we should know?" Her voice was careful now, surgical. "Of course not," I replied too quickly. "He's trying to mess with me. It's a game." "Ah!" "Doesn't feel like a game," said my uncle. "Feels like something serious." Across the table, Logan swirled the last sip of wine in his glass, like he was watching a show. "You know, it's interesting," he said casually, "how people can keep secrets for years. Until they can't anymore." "Logan," my mother snapped. "Stop." "No," Grandpa said, his voice rough and dry but clear. "Let the boy speak. If there's something rotten in this family, better to cut it out than let it fester." The weight of that silence shifted, and now it was mine to carry. "I don't know what he's talking about," I said again, but even I didn't believe it. "Ethan," my dad's voice, calm, controlled, but not casual, not dismissive. "Is that true?" I looked at him and saw no accusation in his face, just something steadier, something unreadable. My father had always been the quiet force in the family, measured, steady, unshakable. But now I realized he was watching me the way a man watches a fire line on the horizon, calculating whether to run or dig in and fight. I opened my mouth, closed it again. What was I supposed to say? That Logan had a half-truth with a venomous twist? That I wasn't the villain, but not exactly the hero either? Logan leaned in again, voice soft now, almost gentle. "You told me you couldn't live with yourself if it ever came out. So maybe it's time you found out if that's true." I felt my pulse throb in my neck. Across the table, my dad didn't look away. He didn't blink. He just waited. And I realized he wasn't looking for an answer. He already knew. Logan opened his mouth, eyes alight with the thrill of control. He was about to say it, the words that would unmake everything I'd carefully rebuilt. But then my father spoke. I know. 2 words. Quiet. Firm. And they landed like a hammer on the table. The room froze. Even Logan blinked. I turned toward my dad, searching his face for a lie, a joke, a signal that this was something else entirely. But he was calm, steady, looking not at me, but at Logan. You. What? I asked, barely above a whisper. David didn't answer me at first. He just leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, hands folded. Then, without looking away from my cousin, he said it again. I've known for years. His voice didn't tremble. He wasn't bluffing. He wasn't posturing. He was making a statement of record. Logan sat back, caught off guard for the first time all night. Well, he said after a pause, trying to recover his grin. That makes things interesting. Sit down, Logan, my father said. Not loud, not threatening. But there was finality in it, the way a judge lowers the gavel after a verdict. Logan didn't move for a moment. Then, quietly, he sank back into his chair, jaw tight. Around the table, murmurs started, questions rising. My mother looked between me and my father, her expression unreadable, a crack forming beneath her polished exterior. Grandpa didn't say a word, but I could feel the weight of his stare. David, Aunt Grace started. What are you talking about? What do you mean you knew? My father turned to her, not cold, but resolved. This isn't dinner conversation. Not now. Then he looked back at me, and for the first time in 5 years, I saw it in his fascinate disappointment, not judgment, but memory. I think it's time, he said, voice softer now. Tell them what happened. On your terms, not his. He didn't look at Logan when he said it. He didn't need to. I sat there, stunned, the weight of the moment pressing down on my chest. For years I'd carried the fear of what he might do if he found out, and now I was staring at the man who had known all along, and chosen to protect me anyway. It was late, cold. A gray drizzle hung over everything like ash. I was sitting in my car outside our house, hands on the steering wheel, jacket soaked through, smoke clinging to every thread of fabric. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, texts from friends, calls from the university, one from Logan I hadn't returned. But the only message I'd answered was my father's. Where are you? Come home. When I walked through the door, I half expected to find him angry, pacing, ready to demand the truth. Instead, he was sitting at the kitchen table, reading the newspaper like it was a normal Thursday. A second mug of coffee sat across from him, still steaming. He didn't say a word as I dropped into the chair opposite him, soaked, shaking, and hollow. I didn't mean for it to happen, I said finally. My voice cracked on the word mean. I got angry. There was yelling. I knocked something over. It hit the power strip. The fire caught fast. He nodded once. Slow. Is anyone hurt? Derek's in the hospital. Smoke inhalation. He'll be okay, they said. They think I pulled him out in time. I laughed once, bitter. They called me a hero. My dad didn't smile. He just looked at me, deep and steady, like he was sorting through the pieces of what I'd just said. Then, anyone know it wasn't an accident? Logan does. He saw me afterward. I told him. I rubbed my hands over my face. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. You came home, he said. That was the right move. I expected a lecture. I expected disappointment. What I got was silence. Then he stood, went to the cabinet, pulled down a file box, and set it on the table. Inside was a portable scanner, some documents, and a folder labeled in his handwriting, Ethan, contingency. You're going to tell the school it was faulty wiring, he said, flipping the box open. I'll help make sure the story holds. He paused. But only if you're never this careless again. I should turn myself in, I said, half hoping he'd agree. He looked at me then. You want to punish yourself. I get that. But this would follow you forever. One mistake doesn't define a life, Ethan. What you do next does. It was 2 weeks after the fire when Logan made his move. He showed up at our house unannounced, just as I was starting to breathe again. The campus had gone quiet about the incident. The school had bought the electrical malfunction explanation without much resistance. Derek was recovering. And I was slowly convincing myself the worst was behind me until Logan rang the doorbell. My father opened the door before I could get to it. He didn't say a word, just stared at Logan like he already knew what this was. Nice place, Logan said, stepping inside uninvited. Cozy, quiet. Hard to imagine anything accidental happening here. I tried to get in front of him, steer him outside. But my father raised a hand. Let him talk. Logan turned to me, all smiles. Relax, cousin. I'm not here to cause trouble. Just wanted to make sure you're okay. Must be stressful carrying that kind of guilt around. What do you want, Logan? My father asked, his voice like gravel. Logan shrugged. I don't know yet, but secrets have value. Maybe someday I'll need a favor. Maybe I'll need a little help getting into Grandpa's good graces again. You know how competitive family can be. I stepped forward, fists clenched. But my father beat me to it. You'll stay away from him, he said. You'll keep your mouth shut. And if I so much as hear a whisper from you again, I'll make sure the truth that you were there, that you saw everything and said nothing, ends up in the same report I kept out of public record. Logan blinked. You wouldn't. I already have a file, my father replied, with your name on it. You don't want to see what's in it. Logan left after that, face flushed, smile gone. But the damage was done. He'd tasted power. And even if he stayed quiet for a while, I knew it was only a matter of time before he circled back. He always came back when he saw an angle. Later, I found a folder tucked into my father's locked cabinet, copies of emails, timestamps, surveillance screenshots, a private investigator's work. Logan had tried to reach out to Derek a few days after the fire. Nothing obvious. Just probing. Fishing. My father had seen it coming. He always did. Back at the table, Logan's silence didn't last long. His smirk returned as quickly as it had vanished. He pushed his empty dessert plate away and laced his fingers together, resting them lightly on the tablecloth, like a man about to negotiate terms. Well, since we're all being honest now, he said, maybe it's time we talk about the real issue. My mother stiffened. What issue? Logan's eyes moved from her to my grandfather at the head of the table. The will. On. You could feel the shift like the temperature had dropped 5 degrees. My grandfather's glass paused mid-air. Logan leaned in. We all know there's been talk. About changes. About who's getting what. It's not exactly a secret that Grandpa's been reevaluating. That's not your concern, my father said flatly. Isn't it? Logan's voice sharpened. Because from where I'm sitting, some of us have put in the time. Some of us have stayed close, supported the family, and some of us, he looked at me, nearly burned everything down. I pushed back from the table, but my dad's hand touched my arm just briefly. Enough to steady me. Enough to remind me that I didn't need to rise to Logan's bait. Not this time. I'm not saying Ethan doesn't deserve something, Logan continued. I'm just saying maybe it's worth reevaluating how much, given circumstances. You think this is about money? My grandfather asked, voice low and surprisingly clear. I think it's about fairness, Logan said. About transparency. About not rewarding people for mistakes the rest of us would have paid dearly for. My father stood then, slowly, deliberately. This is what it was always about, wasn't it? Logan spread his hands. I just want what's fair. You tried blackmail 5 years ago, my father said. I warned you once. And you still came here thinking you could leverage this secret for your own gain. Because I thought you'd be too ashamed to speak up. Logan snapped. But you forgot one thing, David replied, stepping around the table. I wasn't protecting him because I was ashamed. I was protecting him because I saw who he became after it. The guilt. The responsibility. You, he pointed at Logan. You only see weakness when someone falls. I see strength when someone gets back up. Logan stood, face flushed. So what? You think Grandpa's going to write me out because I pushed a little? My grandfather finally spoke. You wrote yourself out, boy. You just didn't know it yet. The silence after my grandfather spoke was thick and waiting. Logan didn't sit. He looked around the table, searching for support. But no one met his eyes. Not Aunt Grace. Not Uncle Mitch. Not even Jordan, who usually hung on his every word. My father remained standing, calm as ever, but there was something harder in his expression now. Something surgical. You want to talk secrets, my father said, his voice steady. Then let's talk about yours. Logan scoffed. What? Now you're going to turn this around on me? I didn't set a dorm on fire, David. No, my father replied. But you did try to extort your cousin over it. And when that didn't work, you started sniffing around Derek Hale. I have emails. I have screenshots. You forget people talk. Logan's jaw tensed. And let's not pretend this is about family legacy or loyalty. My father went on, reaching into his coat pocket. He pulled out a thin folder and placed it on the table with quiet finality. You want fairness? Let's look at fairness. He opened the folder and slid a page toward my grandfather. This is a bank statement, David said, voice even. It shows Logan accessed the family account 2 months ago, transferred $12,000 to an unlisted expense account. No authorization, no explanation. Logan's face drained. That was for investment. No, my father interrupted. That was theft. You didn't ask. You didn't explain. And you didn't think anyone would notice because you thought no one was watching. Grandpa, Logan said quickly, voice suddenly softer. I can explain. You've been explaining yourself for years, my grandfather said coldly. I just didn't realize how much of it was rehearsed. My father stepped back, letting the words settle. We all make mistakes, he said, finally glancing toward me. But the difference between Ethan and you, Logan, is he owned his. You've been weaponizing other people's ever since you were old enough to realize secrets could be traded like currency. Logan's fists clenched at his sides, his breathing short and sharp. Get out, my grandfather said. Logan hesitated, scanning the room for a lifeline. No one moved. Now, he said again. Logan's chair scraped the floor as he stepped back, knocked into the table, and left without another word. The door slammed, and for the first time that night, the house felt still. For a long moment, no one said anything. The room felt suspended, like the entire house was holding its breath, waiting for the sound of Logan's tires on gravel. When it finally came, distant and fading, the tension cracked. Utensils were set down, napkins dabbed at dry mouths. Someone coughed. My mother looked like she'd just woken from a dream she hadn't agreed to. I cleared my throat. I didn't mean for it to happen. The words sounded small in my own ears, but they cut through the room like glass. My mother turned to me slowly, brows drawn tight. What didn't you mean, Ethan? The fire, I said, voice low but steady. 5 years ago. It wasn't an accident, but it wasn't what Logan made it sound like either. There was a fight. I lost control, and someone almost died because of it. Aunt Grace gasped softly. My cousin Jordan sat back like someone had pulled the tablecloth from under him. I told Dad the night it happened. I continued. He helped me handle it, quietly, because he knew if it came out, it would ruin everything I'd built, and he didn't want one momentone stupid mistake to define the rest of my life. My mother's lips parted, then closed again. She looked at my father, eyes wide. You knew? I did, he said simply. And you didn't tell me? I told no one, he replied, because it wasn't my story to tell. She looked back at me, her face trembling on the edge of disbelief. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, I said. I just wanted you to know. All of you. No one rushed to fill the silence, but something shifted. The judgment I feared didn't come and exactly. There was surprise. There was disappointment. But beneath it, I saw something else. Respect. Not the kind you demand. The kind you earn by finally telling the truth and not flinching. Lily reached over and squeezed my hand. Grandpa nodded once. And my father sat down beside me, his hand resting on my shoulder. Not heavy. Not forced. Just there. Solid. Steady. Like it had been all along. The house was quiet. By the time I found my father in the den, lights low, fire dying to embers. The storm had passed. Logan was gone. The tension had broken. And the truth I'd buried for half a decade now sat out in the open like a letter no one wanted to read but everyone needed to. David sat in his leather armchair, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. He looked tired, older than I remembered. But when he glanced up and saw me, his face didn't harden. It softened. Can't sleep? He asked. Not really, I said. I crossed the room and sat on the couch opposite him. Neither of us spoke for a while. The silence was comfortable, like breathing after holding it too long. I thought you'd hate me, I finally said. He looked at me, eyebrows raised. Why? For lying. For hiding it. For not telling Mom. For dragging this mess into the family tonight. He gave a small shake of his head. You didn't drag anything, Ethan. Logan did. And as for hiding it, he paused. You weren't hiding it. You were carrying it. There's a difference. I stared at the fireplace. The crackle of the last few logs the only sound. You never brought it up again, I said. After that night. Not once. I didn't need to, he replied. You punished yourself more than anyone else ever could. I saw it. In the way you moved, the way you worked, how you looked at yourself after that. You thought you were broken. But I saw someone trying to rebuild. I felt like a coward. No, he said. Firm now. You were a kid who made a mistake. And then you did something. A lot of people never do. You owned it. Quietly. Every day. That takes more strength than you give yourself credit for. I swallowed hard. Thank you. He stood slowly and crossed the room. When he put a hand on my shoulder this time, it wasn't just reassurance. It was forgiveness. I've always been proud of you, Ethan. Not because you're perfect, but because you never stopped trying to be better. The fire popped once, and we stood there together, the warmth between us more real than it had been in years. The morning came quiet, wrapped in pale winter light. Snow still blanketed the yard outside, untouched and clean, like the world had reset itself overnight. The house felt different too. Still large, still too formal, but softer somehow. There was no yelling, no chatter, just the low hum of coffee brewing and footsteps creaking on old floorboards. Logan hadn't come back. No calls, no texts. No one expected him to. In the kitchen, my mother stood by the sink, rinsing wine glasses. I stepped in and began stacking dishes beside her, without a word. After a few minutes, she handed me a towel. You didn't have to do all that last night, she said quietly. I know, I replied, but I needed to. She nodded, but didn't meet my eyes. I still don't know how to feel about it all. That's okay, I said. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to see me differently. I don't, she whispered, almost too soft to hear. I just wish you hadn't carried it alone. We finished the rest in silence. Later, I found Lily in the living room, packing up decorations with a cup of tea in one hand. She looked up and smiled. Real. unguarded. "Hey, big brother," she said. "You survived." "Barely," I joked. She set the cup down and walked over, wrapping her arms around me. "You're stronger than you think, you know." I hugged her back. "I'm starting to believe that." Grandpa left early, but not before pressing an envelope into my hand. "Don't open it here," he said. "Read it when you're ready." I nodded, unsure of what was inside, but already sensing what it meant. By afternoon, the house was nearly empty. The cars pulled away one by one, and with each goodbye, I felt a little lighter. The weight I'd carried for so long, fear, shame, secrecy, had shifted. It wasn't gone, but it didn't own me anymore. I stepped outside onto the porch, the air crisp, the sky clear. I could see my breath, but I wasn't cold. Behind me, the door opened. My dad stood there, 2 mugs in hand. "One more for the road?" he asked. I smiled and took the mug. "Yeah," I said. "Let's start fresh." I found it later that evening, tucked neatly inside the envelope my grandfather had handed me. Heavy cream paper. Thick, deliberate pen strokes. My name written in his tight, angular script on the front, underlined once. No decoration, no flourish, just purpose. I sat at the desk in the guest room, the same desk I used to do homework at when I was 12, and unfolded the letter with careful fingers. There was no date at the top, but I knew it had been written before dinner last night, before Logan opened his mouth, before I said anything. "Ethan, if you're reading this, then you've already faced a storm I knew was coming. I wasn't sure when, but I trusted you'd meet it head on, when the time was right. Families are complicated. Ours more than most. There's history in these walls. Pride, pressure, secrets too. I've seen what silence does to men. And I've watched too many in this family let that silence define them. You didn't. You faced consequences, and you still walked forward. That's what a leader does." I paused, my breath catching. My grandfather wasn't one for praise. He led with expectations, not affirmation. But these words felt like more than approval. They felt like passing the torch. "I'm naming you executor of the estate. Not because you're the oldest. Not because you're the loudest. But because you're the one I trust to protect what matters to our family, our future, and the truth." Whatever Logan told himself he deserved, he earned nothing. You've earned everything by carrying more than your share and never demanding credit for it. Don't let this place own you. Lead it. Shape it. Make it better than we did. And when you have a son one day, tell him what you've learned. Not just the clean parts. All of it. That's how we break the cycle. Arthur. I folded the letter back into its envelope, fingers trembling not from fear this time, but something quieter. Something like release. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, snow was falling again. Gentle now, like the house had finally exhaled. The past was still there, etched in memory, in scars, in long shadows, but for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of it. It was part of me, but it no longer defined me. And that, I realized, was the real inheritance. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.